Typical security issues and threats. Do a bit of discussion about risks and how we plan and manage those threats. And then we'll move on to taking a look at the basic principles of security, things like security policies, security mechanisms, and how do we detect security threats, and how do we prevent security threats. And then we'll take a bit of a look at what are we up against, and this notion of knowing your enemy. Because if you know your enemy and what they might do, you can better prepare yourself for it. And then this will lead into a final bit of discussion on how do we go about getting security right. As we saw in the last lecture, we saw that so many companies out there are getting cybersecurity wrong or aren't taking it seriously. Whether or not these are big, major international companies or just small businesses, cybersecurity is becoming an increasingly large problem. And before we begin, I thought we'd just set a bit of a context for our new cybersecurity world by taking a look at some interesting statistics that kind of help put everything else into context. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever watched the show Mock the Week, but some of this is going to be based on this, where what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the answer to the question and see if you can work out what the actual question that went with that answer was. So if I show you a number, what does that number actually represent? And feel free to just shout out random guesses, because some of these are actually quite a little bit tricky. So we'll start off with this one. 3.2 billion. So does anyone have any idea what 3.2 billion might have to do with when we're talking about cybersecurity? So it's quite a large number, so it's going to be something rather large out there. What could there be? Close. It's along the right lines, not the amount of websites that are out there, but along those kind of lines.
Devices?
Devices is very close, but instead of thinking devices, think about people.
Like a user?
Users.
You're correct. 3.2 billion is the estimated number of internet users out there at the moment. And that figure is only continuing to increase. If we take a look at some of the statistics, up here we've got a graph of estimated internet usage going up and up and up. We can see that where people thought that maybe this would plateau off and stop growing up, it's just continued to grow and grow. As we see more countries around the world getting internet access, more internet access becoming readily available to people not living in places like cities or well-built up areas, and devices for accessing the internet becoming cheaper and cheaper, lowering the threshold of people, for people to be able to access and become part of the internet community. We've also got a graph down here from Netcraft. They do a lot of internet surveying and internet analysis. And one of the things that they do is they do a survey going across the whole internet to try to work out how many active host names are there online, how many active websites are there online, and they continue to plot this to show again that the size of the internet is continuing to increase as well. Although we've already seen this area here in the early kind of end of the 1990s, early 2000s was the point where we saw a significant growth, and was continuing to grow a little bit, but not at the lengths we were before. On the other hand, the amount of our internet users is going up and up. And obviously, the more people entering the internet, the greater a problem it becomes as more and more of our stuff becomes dependent on what we do online. Systems that used to be done by paper, or used to be done by phones, or used to be manual processes, are now all becoming web applications and things that are done via the internet, increasing the greater amount of loss and damage from cybersecurity attacks. Here's another one, 20 million. So a bit of a smaller number this time, and this one's actually quite tricky, so I'll give you a bit of a hint. It's to do with apps on your mobile. Any thoughts what 20 million could be? It's a bit too small to be the number of total apps that are out there, but it's along those lines.
Apps.
Pardon?
Maybe number of installs per day.
Not the number of installs, but a good guess. Not update. It's about a certain type of application.
Games.
The games would probably be a lot higher than that.
A billion.
given the fact that it seems that everybody with a phone these days has at least one game on it, even if that's just Pokemon Go.
Malware?
Correct. It's the number of mobile malware applications that that Trend Micro believe are out there at the moment. And rather interestingly, a large proportion of these are all actually in China, but there's still a large amount of these mobile malware apps across the world. You're getting good at these. What about this one? 19%. And again, I'll give you a bit of a clue. This is to do with a particular type or example of application that is used on the internet. What do we think that 19% could represent?
WordPress websites.
Got it in one. 90%. I know you know this is one of my favourite topics. But actually, when you think about it, and obviously this is just an estimated number, they don't know for sure. They've got crawlers that go out there and they look at the meta tags of websites and they look at the signatures of websites to determine what technology is powering them. And at the moment, out of the total sites that are out on the internet that they are able to easily analyse and spider, they're getting that 19% figure of them powered by WordPress. You can try this out yourself as well. One of the easy ways to do is just visit a website, and you're probably looking at it already. This looks like it's a WordPress website. If you view the source of the page and look at the top, you'll generally see a meta-generator tag that will not just tell you that it's using WordPress, but even what version of WordPress it is. It's quite fun to do this and look at how out of date a lot of popular websites are, and probably how many of them are vulnerable to security vulnerabilities. Which reminds me, I do have to tell you that although we're covering lots of interesting cybersecurity techniques, penetration testing techniques, don't try this at home, because I don't want to see any of you end up in prison. It's really not worth it. And when I have to put in a reason why the student is no longer on the course and why I haven't marked their final coursework, it's a little bit embarrassing if I have to put they ended up in prison after trying out the techniques covered in this module. So please save me from having to do that one. But yes, but if you think about it, that is a really significant portion of the internet running on an application that's really not very well built or designed or structured or architected, and how many of them are using terrible, terrible plugins. Even if we accept that today WordPress as an application is a lot more secure and a lot better than it was, most of those sites are going to be running plugins that don't have anywhere close to the kind of auditing or evaluation or testing that the WordPress core does. And that is why we have so many botnets, so many denial of service attacks, so much malware being spread around by zombie computers. A lot of them are running WordPress. On a similar topic, 320 hours. Any thoughts on this one? I'll give you a clue, that's not how long you should spend on your coursework. Another suggestion I've had is it is also not how long it takes to clean up somebody's WordPress site after it got hacked. But it's very close. I did have to spend close to about 200 hours fixing one of my friends' WordPress sites where they got the entire thing hacked and I had to sort out their entire website. After which they promised me a year that I never got, so it was very disappointing. Not going to do that again. Definitely wasn't worth spending that amount of time with WordPress. So 320 hours. Any thoughts? And I'll give you a bit of a clue. It relates to something that I've talked about already. No, but a good guess. I'll give you a clue. Think about 4chan. Think about Anonymous. Think about people like that, if you've heard of those names before. Think about what they often do and how they rally behind something and do something that usually causes some annoyance to people. Very close, very close. This one is quite a tricky one. Any other thoughts?
The time when you notice there's something on the website.
Again, another good guess. I'll give you this one. It is the longest denial of service attack that has been done through hacktivism. So hacktivism is when they get lots of people to install stuff on their computers and deliberately try to denial of service attack and take down a website off the internet by having loads of people across willingly send packets towards those websites to try to take them down. And at the moment, 320 hours has been the longest that they've been able to sustain one of those attacks. And that's a long time, particularly given the fact when you're thinking that these are people willingly volunteering to try to take down websites. And a little bit scary just to what these communities are able to get people to do. You know, these are people that have just been convinced to get involved with these courses, just sitting at home, running these programs, probably not even fully aware of what they're actually doing.
What website was that?
I can't remember which website it was, but if you Google 320 hours DDoS, it should be able to tell you. And then a final one. Any thoughts on what this is the answer to?
Worse CMS?
Oh, I'll give you that one, yeah. Any other thoughts? Actually, it's not the worst CMS. If you actually look at a lot of the CMSs that are being built, they're even worse than Word.
Yeah.
That's actually saying something. Any other thoughts? Well, I was actually a little bit mean to you on this one because it's a trick question. Because WordPress is never the answer to anything. So moving on after our little bit of fun, onto what is cybersecurity. So primarily cybersecurity is the detection, protection and prevention against digital threats and attacks. So as we mentioned before, we're looking at things like technologies, we're looking at procedures, we're looking at people, but also the entire digital ecosystem. Lots of people, when they think about cybersecurity, are just thinking, oh, it's only talking about my computer, it's only talking about internet websites, it's only talking about my phone. But actually, this is a far greater thing. We've got so much networked infrastructure now. We've got things like power plants and things that are connected. We've got things like people's cars that are linked onto it that you can control from your phone. You can unlock them from mobile apps. That's been proven to be pretty insecure if any of you have been following the news. There's an entire digital ecosystem around us. We're not just focused on websites or servers like we were in the past. And this is only increasing with the whole prevalence of the Internet of Things. Like, how many of you have played with any of the Internet of Things technologies? Any of you got any internet or network-enabled devices in your homes or houses or cars? Recently, I got involved with Philips Hue, which has got the remote-controlled light bulbs, where you can link them all together and then be able to run commands that will change all the lighting. I set this up so that I can walk into my lounge at home and go, computer, lights on, and all the lights come on. And then I've even programmed it with the Star Trek sound as well. So you go, computer, and it goes, lights on, and it goes, and then when I'm done at the end of the day, it's really nice because I don't have to turn off anything or do anything. I just go, computer, bedtime. And the computer shuts down, turns off all the lights, and turns on my bedroom lamp on upstairs. This is quite cool stuff. But at the same time, this is all stuff that's now all being networked and linked because each of those light bulbs are linked via Zigbee, connected to a Zigbee router that then gives it an IP address on the network, which is controllable via HTTP. I could actually prank my housemate who is sitting in the lounge right now from my phone and turn the lights on or make the room go red or start playing music just from my phone right here through that system. I'm not going to, but it's always a fun temptation. Particularly given the fact that they are able to do absolutely nothing today and they're just lying at home having a nice relaxing day while I've got an entire day packed full of lectures. Not that I'm envious at all. But this is the kind of thing that we've got growing, and this is why it's such an exciting area, because we don't really know what the future holds for us, how much of this is going to take off, how much soon all of our devices are going to end up being network connected. We're starting to see it right on the very edges, right on the very niche, people who have got a bit of money to spend or people that like to try out a bit of new technology. But how many of you followed the Google's conference yesterday with the releasing of their new products? One of the big parts of that was that they released with Google Home, which is Google's version of the Amazon Echo. And we're starting to see now people are putting giant microphones and speakers in all their rooms, linked up to the internet, listening to everything that people say in case you give them commands for them to process. And you can just go into the room and say, oh, okay Google, I want to play this particular bit of music, or okay Google, what's in my calendar tomorrow? And how quickly this is going to start spreading to the point where, in order for that device to be able to control other things, people are going to start getting more internet-based devices. Because how tempting is it to be, oh, I could make that so I could turn on the lights automatically so people then get the electronic light bulbs. Oh, it'd be really useful actually if it knows when I walk up to my house and the front door unlocks because it detects my phone's presence and people start switching over to that. And then everything starts getting all linked in. How useful would it be if the kettle could tell me when it's finished boiling? Probably not that useful. That's an example that's a little bit silly, but we're starting to see network-enabled kettles as well. Mainly in places like workplaces where you set the kettle going, you walk away, and then at your computer it can then pop a box saying, your coffee's now ready. But this is all kind of stuff that we're starting to see, and it's all part of this digital ecosystem. So what kind of threats are we looking at? What kind of threats come into it? Obviously there's a massive variety of them. Can anybody think of what kind of things there are to worry about in this world of cybersecurity? I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a couple. We've got things like eavesdropping. You know, you've had situations now where people can install malware on your phone that will sit there and record everything you say and report it back. There have been cases where allegedly the NSA in America have been being able to break into people's phones, record people's conversations, and leave without ever knowing that it's actually happened. Whether or not this is true or not, or whether or not it's rumoring, the technology is there. They could do it. This links in with things like wiretapping as well, being able to intercept details and things that's going along, and even stuff like keyboard logging. We've got things like key interception. We've got things like impersonation, being able to get people's data and being able to create a completely false identity. What other kind of threats can people think of? What things do we have to be worried about? Money and the economic side of things, yeah, very good. And that can stem everything from your personal money. You know, you've linked up your payment details and things on Google Pay or on Apple Pay. What happens if somebody is able to break through some of those security layers, be able to omit the same thing that your card does and be able to pay as you? Or what happens with people being able to compromise chip and pin systems? They've been made a lot more secure now, but it wasn't long ago that there were some serious bugs in it that meant that people were able to create a completely false card and be able to cause a payment after having just walked past you or borrowed your card for a couple of seconds and be able to clone it. So yes, payments and money is a very good one, and it's continuing to grow as we're seeing more and more movement towards contactless payments and towards mobile device-based payments as well. One of the interesting things is on Apple, you have to use your fingerprint to be able to unlock it, whereas Android is slightly less secure. If your phone's already locked, you can still pay with your phone as long as you physically got it on you. And what kind of questions does that arise? So that is a very exciting area as well. Any other thoughts?
Denial of service?
Denial of service, and the whole concept of hacktivism and being able to knock websites off the internet. If you're a software company and you develop something like Windows, and then you've got another software company and you're making a competitor, what happens if you knock them completely off the internet and suddenly go, don't trust them, they can't even keep their website up, come to us instead? That's something that, again, we're starting to see. And there's a whole dark community where companies that are building and developing software can hire people to deal with these things for them. They can go and say, we're releasing a new product tomorrow, and we know our competitor's trying to release it at the same time. We will pay you money behind the scenes to take their website down and keep them offline while we announce our product so that we get all the people buying new stuff. And similarly, we'll continue to get people because we can slag off the other people and say, they're not very good, they don't even have a stable website, they got hacked and they lost people's personal data. Come and use our product instead, and that's a lot more money for them. And a lot of these dirty dealings, it looks like it's the underground people that are doing it, but how often are they actually being paid off by what people think are legitimate companies? So that's another really interesting area, yes. Any other thoughts?
Government sponsored.
Government sponsored is again another really interesting area and continuing to grow. There are even the rumours that World War III will not be fought with weapons, it will be fought with cybersecurity hacks. Because we're just seeing such a great amount of government sponsored stuff coming through. Whether or not in this country, in America, it's really quite concerning seeing the amount of recruitment that they're doing at the moment for very top secret projects, many of which sound quite unsavoury, quite concerning. And what are they going to do with all this information? What are they going to do with all these abilities? You know, they're putting some of the projects and things they're putting together, and you're thinking, there is really no legitimate use for what you're doing. That's slightly concerning, and it's going to be something that we're probably going to see the impact of in a few years. Any other thoughts?
Connected with the service.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. Any other thoughts?
Releasing confidential information.
So we've seen an awful lot of these data breaches. From the last lecture with the bubbles, where we showed all the companies losing all that. That's a really significant thing. People are trusting more and more information over to them to keep the data private and data secure, and are putting more and more information into the cloud. And it feels really quite terrible when they make a mistake and it all gets exposed. So that's some really good suggestions. Some other ones as well: cryptanalysis, things like social engineering, physical security, malware, exploiting vulnerabilities, and combination of different attacks. And this is just to name a few. You've already given some really good examples as well. So who exactly do they affect? Well, again, we've already heard from some of your suggestions, just the kind of different levels that we've got here. Some of them on a national security and infrastructure level. Sometimes government and public bodies. How many times have we seen people that we trust within government having actually lost data? You know, they left behind a USB memory stick, their servers got compromised, somebody managed to break through a government site and be able to steal data. The economic processes and banking systems. You know, what would happen potentially if stuff like the stock exchange was able to be compromised? We've seen it in certain films where they propose the idea. You know, the person walks in with a dodgy memory stick, plugs it in, and suddenly collapses the world's economy. But could something like that actually happen? And the final very important one is actually the everyday citizen, the normal person, you. Because you are a target of cyber attacks. Your phishing emails, the malware that comes through, the people that are trying to hack your computer daily that you don't even see anymore. If you actually fire up something and watch and look at the amount of people trying to port scan your internet connection, you are under constant cybersecurity attack. And where do they come from? They come from, you've got things like criminals, we've got competitors, I gave some examples, we've got hackers that are trying to show off. We've got stuff actually coming from the government, people that we think we can trust are also engaging in this. On the other hand, we've got terrorists. Well, really, government or terrorists just comes on to whether or not you're on the winning side or not, doesn't it, really? You've got things like ethical hackers that are just trying to do a good thing, but not necessarily in a good way. Former employees, particularly if you're a company. If you annoy someone, are they going to try and get revenge on you and attack you? There have been quite a few cases of this. There was a case in San Francisco a while ago where there was a person who had set up the whole new infrastructure, linking together lots of government and public bodies' network infrastructure together, and he was the only person who knew the password. And they made the mistake of firing him before they got the password. Bit of a mistake there, because then he was able to hold their entire network to ransom. Then when they made him give away the password, which he did, but they didn't realise that he'd left himself a back door. So a few days later, the entire thing failed irreparably because of the way he'd been treated. Things to worry about. Not sure whose side I'd be on there. Aggrieved customers or accidental customers trying to break into your system. Things like contractors, people that you work with. Whistleblower, all of you have probably heard the Snowden stories, but there's similar things like that. And really, everybody could be a potential attacker, sometimes unintentionally. If your friend's got malware on their computer, comes to visit your house, and is sitting there, and your computer's trying to bring down your internal network because you let them have your Wi-Fi password, even people you think you can trust, can you trust their technology? So a few things to remember as well, is what we're doing here is we're building fences, not walls. When it comes to cyber security, we can try to make things more secure. We can do our best to put things around the edges, but we're not being able to create completely non-penetrable solutions. And similarly, you can lock the door, but it's no good if the window is open. You could build an absolute fort around a particular system, but it's no good if you can tunnel up from underground from a tunnel, of which there's a free opening right over there. And a secure system is only as strong as its weakest link. And one of the interesting things to think about is sometimes that could be you. If you're the person who is responsible for implementing all of this security, and you make a mistake, you could actually be the system's weakest link. If you choose to ignore something that you know is insecure, if you choose to think, well, everything else is secure, but nobody's ever going to try and get to that server, nobody even knows it exists, or you make an error in judgment, you could actually be the weakest link in the system that brings the whole thing down. One of the things that we often see is with system administrators that give themselves full access, full privileges, and full control over everything because they like to have all that power and they think they need it. And how bad is it when that system administrator is the person who gets compromised because he fell for a phishing link or he accidentally ran something on his computer in a moment of complacency and brings the entire network down? One of the corporations that I worked at a while ago had a very interesting situation where a person had got infected on their personal computer with Configure. And at this point, it hadn't spread because everything was all up to date, everything was all protected, and everything was all fine. So it was one individual compromised machine. And they call up the system administrator and say, I think I've got some malware on the machine. So the system administrator comes along to this computer and logs in with the domain administrator account and password. The domain administrator account and password has had full read and write access to everything in that organisation. Every shared network drive, every bit of group policy, everything. And in those 20 seconds while we logged in, it spread everywhere. And suddenly, they had an entire organisation that was infected. And it took them 2 months to recover from this, because every time they cleaned one of the computers, it would just respread. These are the kind of mistakes that hopefully you won't make. It's also about that cybersecurity education is an emergency. We shouldn't be needing to have modules and lectures like this. We shouldn't be in a situation where we're getting continual headlines of people getting broken into. But we are, and we've got to try to do our best to save ourselves, and at that, even the world. Particularly when you see stories like this coming through. It's just become so commonplace now. FBI says a mysterious hacking group has had access to the US government files for years. And they just mentioned this in one of the reports. And you're just thinking, is this not concerning to you? We had the Syrian government hacked. 43 gigabytes of data was spilled online by hacktivists. And even services and things that we use, Dropbox most recently, login data for 68 million users is now for sale on the dark web. This was just from a couple of days ago. If you look at it out there, all of those details, passwords, usernames, email addresses, even files stolen from their Dropboxes are now available. And it's only going to get worse. So what exactly does the future hold? What kind of up-and-coming trends are there when it comes to cybersecurity? Well, first of all, what kind of malware do you think has been the most popular and most successful over the past year? Ransomware. Extortion. Extortion works, and it's continuing to work really well. And we're only going to be seeing more of it, because somebody accidentally stumbled onto it, found out that actually people were paying large sums of money, and if you hold users to ransom, it was really true to believe that probably none of them actually do things like backups. And that when all of their files have disappeared, they're going to pay money for it. And until people learn a lesson from that, and at the moment, it seems that people would rather pay the money, get their files back, wait a month, get infected again, and have to do the same thing. It's almost like it's become a thing that they just have got used to paying for. Like your phone. Oh yeah, every month I pay for my phone, I pay for my TV, I pay to get my files back when they get stolen. It's just something that's just become a normality for them. And that, until that attitude changes, we're just going to be seeing more and more extortion. And it's only going to get worse, particularly when it starts affecting things like companies. There was a legal firm who got CryptoLocker variant infected, and all of their legal cases, all of their notes, all of their documents all got encrypted. They had people going off to court that afternoon. So immediately, they paid the massive sum to get all of their files back, and then tried to cover it all up so that nobody knew. And we're seeing so much of this now, it's only going to get worse. Little bit of a clue here. The Internet of Things. We've seen the proofs and concepts of these coming, and we've seen proofs and concepts of being able to manipulate and attack these infrastructures. There's one to use Philips Hue as an example, there's a proof of concept release that by browsing to a malicious website, it could take control of all of your lights, turn them all off and stop you from turning on any lights in your house. You've had cases where people can now drive past a house that has got these electronic lights and take control of all of them and unlink them from the previous network and link them all to a new malicious network, giving them A, momentary control over them, but B, preventing your ability to be able to use them, and suddenly all of the money you've invested in them has become useless because they've all unlinked and then been overwritten to the point where they can't relink back up to your network, causing thousands of pounds of damage. And we started to see it in home appliances, vehicles, stuff like medicine-based cabinets that are on the network, identify and allow you to have medicine at certain points or give people medicine at particular points. How concerning is this, that these are now starting to be affected by exploits? And as I mentioned earlier, digital assistants, things like Google Home. Also, it's going to be a lot less obvious. At the moment, we've been seeing a lot of changing and manipulating. At the moment, we've been seeing an awful lot of data being deleted and data being released. All the breaches, this many passwords have been released, we've stolen all of these email addresses, we've successfully compromised so-and-so, and they're shouting about it. But there's going to be a lot more change now that people know how to break into these systems, and now that you've got more competent people doing it as opposed to people trying to show off. What happens if they start changing and manipulating data rather than shouting about it and saying that they've actually released data? Similarly, we're starting to see backdoors be introduced into more and more systems. Some of them semi-legitimate, being introduced by people like the NSA, some of them completely illegitimate that have been sitting there for years with nobody realising them. And that's going to continue. There's a big shift now towards not shouting and not saying, look what I've achieved, and just silently benefiting from all the things that you have successfully exploited. We're getting more users of more technology. We've been through the tablet era, which has opened up technology to a lot of non-tech savvy people. We've now got a whole new generation of older aged people who generally weren't so savvy with general computers, now being able to use things like tablets. And it's even opened it up to a lot. The whole introduction of the tablet has just made the internet so much more accessible to a greater amount of people. And the next era that is predicted is the assistant era. All the Google Home-like devices being installed into people's houses, all sending everything over the web, all being web-based and linking up with everything in their house. We're also seeing a greater move between digital replacing physical. After all, why go to the issues of dealing with things like chip and pin and stealing a physical card and doing it physically when you could just do it all online? There are even services out there that provide things like digital account theft. This website out there allows you to buy PayPal accounts that have been compromised and hacked. It will tell you how much the balance is there and whether or not it's got a linked credit or debit card to it as well. By the way, these balances, this is a German-based website, so these are actually commas, not dots. So that's 1,300 euros or 1,000 US dollars. Oh. And if you see the price that they're selling them for, we're getting like $177, $82. These could potentially make rather good investments if you were so inclined, because it's a good way to try to get money. Oh, I should probably cover up the name of that website. Don't want any of you going there and trying our hands at acquiring illegal PayPal accounts. But these are the kind of things that we need to worry about. So how do we deal with these threats? Well, something that a lot of organisations are needing to do is now to take cybersecurity into account as part of their risk management strategies. So when they used to be having to think about what happens if our building floods, what happens if stuff catches fire, they're now having to think about what happens if our core infrastructure gets compromised, what happens if we have a malware attack, what happens if we see a user gain access to files they shouldn't do and release them. And it's all about analysing and controlling the risks. Now, most of you have probably seen risk assessments before, but it's taking what is the probability that an adverse circumstance will occur and how can we try to manage that. So to start off with, we analyse the risks. What would the impact of this be? If someone was to gain access to our file server, what would the impact of this be? If someone compromised our public-facing website, how much damage could they potentially do? If we had an aggrieved ex-employee who had full administrator rights to the network, what could the damage and impact from that be? And what are the probabilities of these things happening? And then after having analysed these risks, we then need to ask the next questions. How can we try to control them? And this comes under three major categories. How could we avoid these risks in the first place? How could we prevent it from occurring? You know, if we segregate our public website from all of our internal systems, we now avoid the risk of our internal databases being exposed because somebody compromises our public website. if we have proper user security level segregation so that the system administrator doesn't have access to all the personal information, then that's greatly, then there is no way that the system administrator even can expose all of that information. Then we look at minimization. How can we minimize the chance of it occurring? If we keep all of our software and our servers up to date, if we keep our infrastructure managed, if we install things like network intrusion detection systems that can analyze potential things here, that can help minimize the risks of our network getting compromised, or at least enable us to deal with it before there's too much damage. And then we've got contingency. If it does occur, what can we do next? How can we control the damage? How can we resolve it before it becomes an absolutely massive issue? We're also taking a look at security policies. And a security policy is a rough idea of how to keep a system secure. And this is achieved through various security mechanisms. And we need to do better than what we do now. So what do we want to ensure with security policies? And the general notion in the past was the CIA model. They've added another A onto it, and they've also added an N onto it as well, which you might see later. But basically, confidentiality, trusted information should be kept secret. Integrity, you should be able to know that information on the system hasn't been manipulated, hasn't been modified. The information should be available, so, system downtime, denial of service attacks. And also authenticity is one of the new ones they've added, making sure that you actually know that who sent this was who you thought that they sent it. And we've got the whole world of things like digital signatures there. And in order to achieve these, we use security mechanisms. And there's two major aims of these mechanisms. We've got prevention and we've got detection. So can anyone give some ideas? How could we try to prevent security breaches? I'll give you a first example. Authentication. So this is, whether or not you're doing authentication with things like card readers, whether or not you're doing authentication with things like passwords, all kinds of forms of authentication. You can try to restrict who has access to certain things and require them to authenticate to it. Does anyone have any other ideas of how we can try to prevent these kinds of security risks? Yeah, so that still fits under the column of authentication, but it's another good example of it. And we're starting to see that grow more and more with things like card readers, RSA-based devices, phone-based authentication, stuff that requires you to have something physically as well as something that's in your mind or belongs to the person. Any other thoughts? Yeah, firewalls is a good one. That's on the list. So by trying to control access in and out to certain systems. The key thing with firewalls is making sure that the rules that you have on your firewalls are actually useful. There's no point just installing a firewall and thinking that it has solved all of your problems. There's been issues even at this university with a firewall misconfiguration allowing people to be able to get to systems and things that they shouldn't have done, just because the rules were so complex, nobody knew whether or not they were actually working or not at all. Or they'd introduced some new infrastructure that changed IP addresses, and rules that were previously allowing full access to stuff that was public is now allowing full access to stuff that was private, giving access to file servers that didn't have authentication because it was presumed that you didn't need them because they were behind the firewall, and similar disasters like that. But yes, that's a good example. Any other ideas? Yeah?
Specific policies for users?
Yeah, specific policies, user education, user training, telling them things like, if you get a phishing email, report it to us so that we can deal with it. And don't, whatever you do, fill in all of your username and password details into something that looks suspicious. Or similarly, you're not allowed to execute unauthorized executables on the company network because you're probably just going to end up introducing malware or playing Age of Empires. Any other ideas? Yeah?
Giving the proper privileges to the users.
Yeah. So actually having proper things like authorization and role-based access control, making sure that the right people have the right access and they don't have access to stuff that they don't need, and that the wrong people don't have access to stuff that they don't need. And this doesn't just apply to users, but even to technology. So say, for example, you've set up a website and it's got a database backend. Does the database user you assign to that website really need full access to that database, including the ability to drop and delete every single table? Lots of people that set up PHP-based websites with MySQL create a MySQL user, call it, database, give it a password, and then put that username and password into the application. Now that database user, if there's a SQL injection vulnerability, has full access to everything. And if you've got a website that's only got, some people that are using it only need read-only access, if you've got a database user that only has read access to those to those tables, or even to the whole database itself, even if they're able to do a SQL injection attack, suddenly they're no longer able to modify data, just be able to read data. If you restrict it even further, that database user can now only access tables that that user would ever need to be able to do. Should a particular user ever need to be able to access some of these parts of your database, if you've got a web application that stems and covers loads and loads of different areas, do you really want that user to be able to potentially have full access to that database? So it's not just based on user access, but also on the technology behind that as well. But it's a very underused area because it takes time, it takes work to actually go away and think about who does need access to this. Who should have full access to this? Who needs restricted access? And it takes time to maintain it as well. I mean, the worst thing is you have a person that needs to do their job, clicks a button, and it tells them access denied, when they really, really needed to do that. And you have to stay very on top of that. And a lot of businesses just aren't willing to invest the time needed to make that happen. We've got things like encryption. At least if all of your stuff is all leaked out and all of your documents get stolen, if they're all encrypted with a key that you didn't leave in the same place as all the documents, you're in a far better state than you are if all of your documents are just sitting there, somebody grabs them all, and they're like, we've just stolen all of this legal firm's case files. Firewalls we had suggested earlier. Network segmentation, again very similar, making sure that different areas of the network are protected and isolated from each other. So instead of it all, so if somebody manages to compromise this system on the outside of the network, you don't want them to be able to take control of absolutely everything. Things like backups, the perfect response to stuff like CryptoLocker. If all of your files do get encrypted and somebody's unfortunately applied a piece of malware, then at the very least, you should just be able to go, oh, that's a shame, delete all the files, restore everything from yesterday's backup, and continue on as normal. Sadly, that rather rarely happens. Updates and patches, keeping all of your services and software all up to date and working. And as we heard earlier, training and education. Then we've got detection. How can we detect if stuff has been attacked or manipulated? How do we detect if there has been some kind of attack? So logging and auditing is very good. What about on a particular file level? Honeypots is another really good suggestion. That's also on the list a little bit later. Any other thoughts? How could we determine if, say, files or signatures have been modified?
Antivirus.
So, yeah, antivirus is another one, but also things like hashes. We can have digital signatures on things and detect whether or not, does this file signature match what it should do? And if it doesn't, we know something's been tampered with. They're often used in things like online election systems as well. Somebody puts their vote in, a hash is created. If somebody then tries to modify that vote, the hash will no longer line up, and you'll know that someone has tampered with it. Similarly, if any of you have ever downloaded things like Linux distributions, quite often they will come with a digital signature and a hash. And you can compare that hash afterwards with what you've downloaded to make sure that what you've downloaded has been legitimate. How many of you actually do that? Probably not many, because it takes a lot of time and a bit of trouble. But maybe you should, particularly when we've seen that certain Linux distributions, I believe it was Slackware recently, their online repository was compromised, and all of the live and installer media was replaced with versions of backdoors. And it took a while before someone realised that actually the hash didn't match. What they downloaded wasn't what they thought that they had downloaded. And suddenly you realise someone's tampered with this, and then you can do something about it. Intrusion detection systems, we had malware and antivirus scanning, other kinds of monitoring systems as well to work out if anything's going on that shouldn't. We had honeypots, suggested earlier, which again is another very good example. If you can lure somebody into a trap, detect that they've accessed it, and immediately start dealing with the problem. This is the case where the emergency phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody's trying to take down your network. You can then get in there, shut off all the important stuff while they're still inside the honeypot, and prevent any actual damage from happening. Meanwhile, while they're in that honeypot, you can find out information about them. How are they getting in? What vulnerabilities did they use? And be able to deal with that as well. So honeypots are very, very useful, particularly if you're dealing with sensitive information, because you'd much rather that they find a trap than actually get all of your customer details. And again, training and education is another form. Can you use your users to your advantage? If they find vulnerabilities, if they find a phish, if they find malware, if they let you know, you can deal with it before it becomes too late. And this links in with the next point as well, disclosure policies. Encouraging our users to actually come to us and say, oh, yeah, there's an issue here, we think this system is insecure. This system seems to have an issue, there's something not quite right here, it needs fixing. As opposed to them being too scared to come to you because they're worried that they will lose their job because they managed to see something they shouldn't have done. It's much better to encourage the users to be on your side and use them as a resource than to treat them as a hacker themselves. Right. So what are typical components of security mechanisms? You've probably seen there are some patterns from the things that we were looking at. Things like identification, authentication, authorization, physical protection, introducing stuff like hard maths or randomness. A lot of these come into all of those mechanisms that we talked about earlier. But also things like economics and deception as well. So deception, a perfect example of that is honeypots, and economics are things where, for example, we're making it so expensive or so resource intensive for them to attack us that they just don't bother. You know, things like the introduction of captures, where people have to fill in a captcha in order to be able to use an email form. Suddenly it becomes an awful lot more difficult for them to try to brute force a password or to send an email that they shouldn't, and they will probably just pick a different target that's a lot easier to compromise. And this links into the point that backups are good. This is what you want to. This is not what you want to see when you've forgotten to set up backups for a year. But yet it's something that so many people have fallen into the trap. And looking at statistics, it's actually quite concerning. Kent University did a survey in which they found that 43% of users said that they had paid the fine. And this is just fueling more and more technology like malware like this to come about. And it's estimated that there's around 40,000 infections of ransomware per month happening at the moment. And there's not many hard statistics on this, but CryptoLogger alone was expected to have raised over $30 million in 2013. And that was before it was widely around. Whereas now, it's spread out so much further that I dread to think what kind of numbers we'd be looking at there. And just coming back to this point on training and education as well, one thing to think about is your users are either with you or they're against you. You know, situations where they get something like this. We've got a virus in an invoice, and the user thinks, oh, I deal with invoices, or this could be important, I'll open it, and suddenly your network is infected. If you properly train and educate your users, they won't fall into this trap. Yes, it takes a bit of time. Yes, it takes some money. Yes, your users will probably find it boring, and some people won't benefit from it. But if it saves your network from becoming compromised, it's really worth investing in the people who are probably one of those weakest links in your organization. And this leads us on to this whole idea of how to get security right. Don't make assumptions. It's too easy to say, oh, that will never happen, the users will never do this, nobody accesses this system, we will never be a target of cybersecurity attacks. And these kind of things you just can't make because you will end up, maybe not immediately, but at some point down the future, it will come back to bite you. But on a similar case, you can't be a perfectionist. If you tried, I know some system administrators who are trying to come up with the most amazing security architecture. They're still designing it now, 4 years later, and they still haven't implemented any of it because they want it to be perfect before they put it into practice. And as such, they've made absolutely no progress, and I know that they're still vulnerable right now. But they tell me that when they bring in their new framework that they've adopted, it's going to be amazing. And I'll find out how he's got on with that in the next 4 years. Remember your users of your system. Sometimes people will try to be a bit too overzealous with the security that they implement, and it ends up actually having the opposite effect. Yes, you might have made the system really secure, but if you're making your users change their passwords every 3 days, they're going to end up writing them down, sticking them on post-it notes and putting them on their monitor. At which point you've got the person that comes round into the building that managed to get past the security because the security guard has got to do so much checking of things now that he just doesn't even bother. The person comes around, finds the password, logs in and has access to everything. The old adage that you can get into any restricted area of any building as long as you're holding a clipboard and walk as if you're important. Take notes on your clipboard as you're walking along and you'll be surprised where you can get in. And all of this is all about building up layers of security. Remember when we talked about being a fence? Well, at least if we can have multiple layers of fences, you've probably seen some places you go past, they've got like the big metal fence on the outside with the barbed wire, then they've got another layer of fence inside with anti-claim on. Put up all of these layers, and the more layers you can build up, the more secure you are. Be realistic, but at the same time, keep it simple. If you try to end up with security that is just too complicated, what happens when the person that designs that system has left? Suddenly, it all falls into dismaintenance, nobody knows what's going on, nobody has the ability to maintain it anymore, and you end up with a bit of a disaster. Having a nice, simple security policy that says, we have the following security in place, this is how it all works, is something that you can actually maintain and keep going. As we said before, education is really important. Treat your users well, treat your staff well, and make sure that they actually know what's going on. And this links in with not keeping secrets, because trying to do security through obscurity is an absolutely terrible approach, because at some point it will come back to bite you. Just hoping that nobody has hacked that system because nobody has found it yet, or nobody will ever end up trying to do /admin on a particular page, is the worst way of trying to achieve security. When I was doing security consulting, we ended up looking at an equivalent of PayPal that's actually countrywide for another country. And we took a look at their live site because they were so confident. They're like, we're quite happy for you to go on our live site. So we put in /admin/transactions in the address bar, not logged in as any user at all. And it took us straight through to an admin page that was showing every single transaction going through the system that has ever gone through the system, including people's names, addresses, amounts of money, contact details, everything, with no being able to log in, with no needing to log in or anything like that at all. And when we rang them up, they said, oh, who told you about that URL? How did you manage to find that? And we said, we guessed. And then they said, I think we might have a bit of a problem then. And it's like, yes, you definitely do. And as we said, engage with your users and encourage disclosure. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever played a board game called Ingenious. It's surprisingly good fun, and maybe some of you would like to go and play it. But the idea behind Ingenious is really quite clever. You place down, you have small tiles of 2 different colours, and you place them down against other tiles of the same colours, and you get points for all of the colours that touch. And you gain different coloured points based on each turn where you're placing down coloured tiles. Now, the key thing is the way the scoring works, because your score at the end of the game is equal to how much you've scored on your lowest colour, the colour for which you've got the least amount of points. So it doesn't matter if you've got 20 red points, 20 green points, 20 blue points. If you've only got 5 purple points, your score at the end of the game is 5. And it's the same thing with security. You've got all of these different colours, all of these different... If you've got a physical door lock that anyone with a bit of basic lock picking in could go into, unlock and walk straight into your data centre and gain access to your servers. Your cyber security score is equal to the lowest score of all of your security mechanisms that you put into place. And this concept of the weak chain, it is that one weak link in the chain that brings you down. For example, Sony lost 1 million customer passwords and details due to a single SQL injection attack vulnerability on their website. And this was really, really embarrassing for them. And although they thought they got lots of things secure, they forgot about this one little website, one page on it, that had a SQL injection vulnerability. And the hackers themselves made Sony look even worse, because they said, this was the easiest thing we've ever had to hack. We just went into it, put in some dodgy SQL, and it spat out the entire database. They had their weak link. It didn't matter how good all the rest of their security was when you have that single hole. And this leads into a discussion of what is the problem with industry. Now, if any of you have worked in industry, you probably know that this is a bit of a trap. They often know that their systems are insecure. They often know, but it's not a priority. And it tends to go at the bottom of their to-do list. Somebody will say, yes, we've just discovered this system and it's got a vulnerability. And they'll say, thank you for reporting it, we'll do something about it when there's time. And again, if you've worked in industry, you know that there is never time. There is never a point where people are sitting around thinking, we're really bored, there's nothing that needs doing at the moment. Shall we go and look at that to-do list of things that would be really nice to do? It never happens. But the problem is security all too often ends up on that list of, if we get time, we'll do it. And it never happens. Security only becomes important when it is too late. when they lose all of their customer details and then they have to send an apology email around telling everybody what a terrible thing this was and they all need to change their passwords, only then do they suddenly start thinking, we made a mistake here, we need to deal with it, how do we not let this happen again? What they should have said is, how could we have stopped this from happening in the first place? And security just becomes an afterthought. You shouldn't make the problem in the first place. And even taking this out from the context of industry, the fact that so many places do things like penetration testing, they build insecure applications. They know that they're insecure, it's poorly coded, but it was the cheapest option. But they then say, but we need to make sure it's secure before people start using it. So they take their insecure system and they go out to people and say, can you test this and make sure that it's secure? It's completely the wrong way around of doing it. What they should have done is got something properly developed, securely developed from the beginning. And yes, you still want to do a penetration testing afterwards, but the penetration testing shouldn't be the bit where you fix the vulnerabilities. You should fix the vulnerabilities by never introducing them in the first place, by developing good, secure code, and then you do the penetration test to just make sure that you've hit those requirements, as opposed to, let's develop something terrible, penetration test it, find out what needs fixing and fix it. And this leads on to what I have plotted into a flow diagram to try to highlight the problem and see whether or not, if any of you go into industry, whether or not you can try and fix this. So what often happens? We have business as usual. The company is operating well, they're making money, they're selling products, people are happy, things all seem to be going quite well. And then a vulnerability gets found somewhere in the system. Somebody, just a person working at that company, has noticed this server is out of date. This application has a vulnerability in it. I've been able to see this data that I shouldn't have done. This is all fine so far, it's all quite reasonable. And so they go to their manager and say, I found this vulnerability. And the manager says, thank you very much, I put it on the to-do list. We'll get round to it at some point. And then they go back to business as usual. And that cycle continues. Various vulnerabilities are made onto this list. If you go and talk to their system administrator and give them a few glasses of wine, he'll probably be quite happy to tell you, oh yeah, a load of our systems are really insecure. Hope we don't get hacked. And then all of a sudden something happens. I was really excited I got to use the lightning bolt bit of clip art. I didn't usually get to use that. A vulnerability is exploited by someone outside of the company. And what does this lead on to? People get angry and or bankrupt. There's lots of sadness all around, lots of unhappiness, passwords galore, leaked, data lost, company can often fold. Unless you're a big company, if you hit a data loss, data leak or security breach like this, it's the kind of thing that can completely destroy you, particularly if you're a startup. And in the tech industry, that's really bad. Now, I don't know much about flowcharts, but to me, that looks stupid. That seems like there's a missing step in this that could have avoided that whole last step here, which is such a negative thing. Can anyone think what it was? What's my missing block in this chain?
Fix it.
Fix it! It seems obvious to all of us, but unfortunately to many overpaid management people that are sitting in high-paid executive jobs, they don't see it that way. See, their concern is that if we had a bit more of a reasonable flow diagram, something like this that I might put together and think this seems sensible, they see this here and they get scared. They see something, it's going to cost us time, it's going to cost us resources, it's going to cost us money to fix it. Because not only do we have to admit that there is a problem, we have to investigate what the problem is. Maybe it isn't even a problem at all. We then need to fix it. We need to allocate development resources. Instead of developing it for the timelines that we promised that we'd have it for them by next Friday, we're going to have to take people off of that and actually fix this problem. That's going to cost us lots of time and money. And then once we've done that, it's even worse, because then we have to make sure that the problem's been fixed. Have we actually solved it? That's going to take even more time. And what about if this problem exists in multiple systems? We're going to have to start thinking about maybe spending like 2 months having to try to fix these vulnerabilities. And they just go, you know what, nah, it's not worth it, it's too expensive, it costs too much time, we just can't fit it in. Maybe we'll come back to it next year, when things quieten down, after the holidays, when sales go down a little bit, when things aren't quite so busy, and it never happens. What you have to do is try to convince the people that are out there that actually this diagram is an awful lot better than this one. Because if this happens, this is very, very, very bad, as highlighted by the fact that I've made that symbol very large. If we can convey that to them, then maybe they'll actually put the time to invest and realise that this is actually better than that. And it's partly going to be your job to try to convince people of this. In all the three companies that I've worked at in the past, I have had to be the person sitting in a meeting with 7 other people who are all wanting to do this and try to convince them, they're all wanting to do this and try to convince them that this is better. And it's not easy, but you really have to convey to them just what is at risk and how bad it would be when things go wrong, and persuade them that their view of it'll never happen to us is actually not, could very well happen to them. So a little bit of cybersecurity in the UK. How do we try to resolve this? How do we try to do better? Well, there are some cybersecurity standards, and businesses can work with these standards to try to better protect themselves, and they can try to achieve this compliancy. They can say, yes, we actually have these measures in place. Yes, we do frequent audits. Yes, we do have people who will keep systems up to date. And there's some further reading links there if you want to go into more detail. But you don't need to know these in too much detail, but be aware that they exist. And a couple of them that are most important I'll just introduce to you now. We've got the ISO 27001 standard, which is a bit more general on information technology. And this is the international standard for best practice for information security management. And it covers those 3 things that I talked about earlier: confidentiality, availability, integrity, and gives some good best practices and suggested ways to put this into place. And it allows for externally assessment to occur and say, yes, this company is adhering to these standards. Yes, you can be fairly certain that your information is safe. Another interesting one to look at is 27032. This is the guidelines for cyber security. So this has got a particular focus on cyber security threats. What kind of threats are there? What attack vectors are there? And how can you protect yourself against it? What can a company do to put stuff into place to try to best protect themselves from these kind of issues? And it also highlights quite a bit when you're dealing with clients and suppliers. What happens when the information that you're dealing with isn't actually in your hands, but it's being passed on to other people? How do you still ensure that that information is protected and that you're not going to be really, really good at cybersecurity yourself, and then you need to pass it on to an external contractor who accidentally loses it all? And there's various other things as well that you can take a look at if you want. But the main thing about this is just knowing that these standards exist. So we've got stuff there, general guidelines for business continuity, we've got some particular stuff dealing with network security, some particular stuff on application security, and stuff to do with incident management as well. So as we come to the end of this double lecture now, just having a think and putting some of this stuff into practice, how could the university be attacked? So trying to take all of those kind of threats that we've thought about, trying to think about the kind of risks and things, what I'd like you to do for the next 5 minutes is just between yourselves, have a think about some of these questions. So, who might attack the university? How might they attack it? Why might they attack it? From your time here so far and what you've encountered at this university, what weaknesses could there be? And remember, we talked about people, we talked about technology, we talked about procedures. What kind of weaknesses could there be for the university? Now, all of you actually count as an insider as well. You've seen the university from the inside. You've seen things like how the infrastructure works, how the people work, how the processes work, how the departments work, how the computing technology works. What information do you know that could help you? So I'd like you to just between yourselves, just spend 5 minutes just having a chat amongst yourselves and see what answers you think there might be to some of those questions. And see if you can put what we talked about this lecture into practice. We're not actually going to do an attack on the university. Not yet. But it's worthwhile actually thinking and seeing, can we take what we've talked about in the theory there and apply it to an actual situation? So I should give you a few minutes and then we'll come back and have a bit of a discussion. So if you want to just talk amongst yourselves.
现在我们宿舍有个人天天攻击我们这个教务系。我会做这个事情。我会做什么事情？对。Who will attack?
Other universities that don't like Southampton.
Yeah. Like Cambridge, Oxford, yeah, those kind of stuff. And
people that want to steal the research.
Yeah.
Like companies that want to steal the research.
And foreign
Maybe some
terrorists.
talent.
Let's see. Hacker, criminal, government, employees.
Basically everybody.
Yeah, everybody here. Contractor. They are all satisfied with the salary that they paid. By attacking. Use the university ID card and break into the chemistry laboratory and make a bomb. Blow this whole school up. Through network, through physical contact, authenticating technology and
process.
attack. And through media, they make a lot of negative propaganda on the media. That's kind of attack.
Yeah. Affect their reputation.
Yeah.
What weaknesses do you think the university has?
The university computer. I think they should put an X-ray machine at the front door to make sure we don't bring Samsung Galaxy Note 7 into the classroom. Which it would probably be a bomb.
As an insider, what information do you know that could help?
The information do you know could help you. Help me what?
Help you what? Help me attack the
To help me attack the university.
But I mean, we could know where all the buildings are for the main servers, and how to access it, what ID cards you need, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So then we know which ID card we need. We can just go talk to somebody.
And we have the accounts for the ECS internet. Basically, our computer username and password is the tool for hacking some certain websites inside the university.
There are some way if they use the database and you can input some
quite a bit of trouble. So really seriously, do not attack the university or any of its systems or things like that unless you've actually got permission. So what we do give you a chance in this module to do is that we will give you some systems that you can attack with permission, but and those ones won't end you up having to try to explain why suddenly you've been kicked off of your degree. So who else, other than kind of current students? Other universities? Maybe not those universities directly, but people at those universities with a lot of loyalty may try to, if they're particularly competitive on research or particularly competitive on, oh, we don't like Southampton. Sometimes silly feuds and things develop between universities. Portsmouth, there was actually a denial of service attack against Southampton University that occurred during Southampton Portsmouth varsity event, because some of the people from Portsmouth weren't happy that Southampton was winning and started attacking the university. So yes, it does happen. Any other thoughts?
Some kind of criminals?
Yeah, criminals as well. People that are trying to break into the university, cause damage, steal information, that kind of thing. But also, we've seen things like people like Anonymous have actually tried to attack the university as well. Usually because they find something that they don't like. Usually something ridiculous that has just come up out of a Reddit discussion or something like that. And in this case, it wasn't even true. It was something to do with there was a researcher that they didn't like, who had done some research that they disagreed with. The researcher hadn't actually done it, they just cited somebody else that had done it, but because it had been misreported that it was Southampton that did it, they then tried to wage a denial of service attack against the university, started sending threatening emails, started sending threatening videos, and actually waged a war against the university that the university won, thanks to the Janet infrastructure, basically being able to survive their attack. But things like this do happen. Any other thoughts?
Foreign governments.
Yeah, foreign governments. There have actually been attacks from foreign governments on it, particularly, again, if there's particular research that they're interested in, or that they know the university is undergoing, or maybe they just want to try to take down the university. There's various different reasons for it. Any other thoughts?
Commercial companies?
Yeah, commercial companies as well. Some of them can actually be really quite nasty, because lots of companies are just run purely by their want for profit. And let's say that the university is about to release something open source and free as a result of a research project that competes with a product that they have been developing and paying for that they were hoping to sell for thousands. It's the kind of thing that if they can attack the university, kill the project and make everybody have no confidence in it, people will buy their product instead. And it's surprising how much companies will go to, the lengths that they will stoop to in their pursuit of money. Any other thoughts?
Ex-employees?
Ex-employees and also ex-students as well. So, you know, somebody's been unfairly fired, somebody's been unfairly asked to leave or made redundant. There can be a lot of bitterness. And sometimes these things actually connect. If a person of high profile has resigned and left on bad terms, and similarly, somebody like another foreign government is wanting to take down the university, they might team up. How would you like to take down your previous employer? We can give you the resources if you give us the knowledge. And that, again, happens quite often. It can be a very good deal. We share what we know from the inside, you give us your expertise and your resources, and let's really show the university one and see what we can do. And that applies to ex-students as well. There have been ex-students who have been kicked off of their courses due to various issues, and we had one who then tried to hack the university to get back at them. It didn't end up very well for them at all, and they are still in prison now, and probably will be for quite a while later. But it's the kind of thing that does happen. So about how might they attack it? How might you go about attacking the university?
Social engineering.
Social engineering is a very, very good example. It is usually one of the weakest links. Social engineering is incredibly powerful. If you can reach the right person, give them the right sob story, or have just enough of the right kind of information to be able to make them believe you, it's surprising what you can manage to achieve on your way in. And I'll be honest, social engineering is probably one of the main ways that you can attack the university. Any other thoughts?
Theft of a laptop where it's got a VPN.
Yes. And particularly knowing things like a lot of the university resources, things like laptops and things, are actually quite often just left lying around. You know, you can, an academic pops out of their office in a building that is freely possible to walk into for anyone without needing an access card, leaves their office door open, and a laptop's just sitting there in their office while they've gone to make coffee. It doesn't take long to just quickly pop it, grab it, and pop back out again. And if that's got details, passwords and information like that saved, you've now got access to the university network, you've got access to all their files, and probably access to a lot of research and data that is available to everybody within their academic unit or their faculty as well. Any other thoughts?
Mailbox.
Yep, mailbox and emailing people. Again, a kind of form of social engineering, targeted specifically at certain people. Or don't target it at all. Email it to everybody at @soften.uk and see what you can get. Because quite generally, if you email 10,000 people, it only takes one person to fall for your phishing attempt, or to email back with their password because they don't want their account to be closed, to fill in a stupid online form that you put up that makes it look like the Outlook web access form, or if they're feeling scared, if you tell them, your university account is due to be suspended at 12 o'clock midnight tonight, you must follow these instructions within the next 2 hours. All you need is one person to do that, and you've now got a university account that you can log into, connect to the VPN, access all the resources, and that, has happened in the past. And that's why the university has to be so hot on things like phishing and making sure that it doesn't happen and trying to help out with user education there.
Spoof a wireless access point.
Spoofing the wireless access point. You know, things like the Wi-Fi guest network has no protection or anything on it. If you go, that's meant for visiting people to connect to. But if you set up an access point also open with no protection and call it Wi-Fi guest, and you're closer than that one is, people will connect through to you. You give them full internet access and allow them to connect through. Meanwhile, you intercept and modify and manipulate all of their traffic that's going through. Very, very easy to do. Similarly, you can set up your own edge-your-own. You can make it even authenticate. You can make it pop up the box. It will tell you that the certificate is invalid. But how many people, when they see that box that pops up that says, ooh, the certificate's changed since last time you tried to access this, how many of you honestly press continue, and how many of you go and press view details of the certificate and make sure that it can compare it to the previous one, make sure it's still authorised by the same people? How many of you just press continue? Yes. We all do it because quite often you don't have the time to deal with it. You desperately need that bit of information. You need to quickly connect onto the Wi-Fi to download that presentation that you're showing in about 2 minutes' time. And it says, basically the box to the user looks like, if you want to continue doing what you wanted to do, press this button. And they just press that button because it works. So yes, things like EduRoam do have protection to stop you from being able to spoof them. But it doesn't help the fact that the university's own certificate was, for a good amount of period, invalid and required people to press the skip and ignore and allow me to connect anyway button. So if you were to spoof EduRoam, you'd probably be quite successful at that as well. And then of course, how long is it until you redirect their traffic to a page where they have to log in with the university username and password, or you redirect their traffic and capture other stuff, or you just let them keep on browsing and you record and capture everything that they're doing. So yes, that is another very good example of an attack.
Hardware in the university, like lab computers.
Yeah, being able to manipulate and affect hardware, and similarly on the software side as well, you've got the whole malware potential as well. All you need to do is write something rather nasty and get one person within the university to run it, and suddenly, again, you've got access to the university network. And if you tailor it to a specific individual, let's say you want HR records, let's say you want staff details, you know if you cast it onto hr@sutton.ac.uk and said, I'm just returning my confirmation of employment contract, here you go, view the attached Word document, and if you knew enough about the university to make it look realistic, sent to the right people, how likely is it that they would open it? And knowing a lot of the university forms, the university, when they send out forms, have macros already in them because the university use them. So when it pops up a box saying, do you want to allow it to run code on your machine? Are you sure you want to enable macros? They press yes, because they expect it already. Now, you're running code on their computer. And they think what they've just seen is a form. Meanwhile, you've got 5 quick seconds to start up a new thread, download something dodgy from the internet, and start running it on their computer. And they'll never even know. Any other last thoughts? But we've had a really good selection already. All of you are in a perfect position now to try and take down the university. Please don't. So what weaknesses does the university have? What would you say is the university's biggest weakness? The highest risk? Students and staff, actually, the amount of people that are here and the fact that we engage in academic stuff. We've got a lot of people who aren't necessarily invested in the university. If you're a student, if you are a person working at a company, you probably have a lot more loyalty towards that company than you potentially do as a student at the university. You just see it as something that you're passing through. So you might not even care about, oh, it's just the university network, if I run this on this lab machine, it doesn't matter if it's malware, it's just, it's fine. Whereas if you're working at a company, you probably have a bit of a different attitude. But also, that amount of people, and a lot of them not necessarily particularly experienced, they've not had training, they're people just coming in and existing here for a while and leaving. If you go to a company, most of them will force you to sit through silly IT security briefings and get you to do training that nobody will listen to, but at least they're trying. Whereas if you're a student, you don't have to worry about any of that. You've not had any training about phishing. There was an announcement on it in the corner of SUS that I would imagine 0.0001% of people click. Because who's got the time to read an announcement about something that you don't care about? And that's probably the university's biggest weakness. Because as we said, you just need one single person in the institution that you can compromise, and suddenly you gain access to everything. What other weaknesses does the university have? Things that the university probably has in its environment that are different to, say, a corporation or a business.
They don't have standard builds, so they have various builds.
Yeah, they've got various different builds. They don't have a standard architecture that they can just deploy out.
You can like walk inside any building you want. No one's really checking anyone.
Yeah, it's an open environment. People, you can just walk into a lecture theatre. A random person can just walk in and sit into this room right now, sit through it, and then go back home again without having anything to do with the university at all. And while they're here, they could probably, you know, if I popped out for a bit, I might trust all of you because I think you're all my students. I walk out, leave this logged in, and they just pop up to the computer. You might just expect that they're a person from iSolutions. They go onto the computer, access my files, grab a load of stuff, delete a load of stuff, and walk out. I come back in and say, what's happened to all my stuff? And you'd be like, oh, person from my solutions came. And you're like, there's no person from my solutions here. But that kind of thing is actually really easy to happen because you can just get anywhere you want to. You know, the examples that we gave about being able to take something from a lecturer's area. Any other thoughts? Yeah?
The ID card, you can access the printer just by swiping the card.
Yeah.
And the dogs as well.
Yes. So if you're able to get an ID card, then suddenly you gain even greater access. And the fact that the ID card system itself is somewhat vulnerable. It works on the same system, the early LifeS system, that has already been compromised. If you have the correct tools, you can create yourself an ID card that will allow you access to all buildings and all rooms. If any of you are doing the secure systems module next semester, we'll go a little bit more into depth into that. But again, that is quite a significant vulnerability. We protect a lot of the critical infrastructure in this university. Server rooms and things like that are protected by access cards that allow you into them. And those access cards themselves are vulnerable. And this is something the university knows. And it goes back to that whole flowchart that I showed you before. The amount of cost to replace all of the access card infrastructure across the university is rather high, so they're not going to put the money in to do so, and therefore, at the moment, they know that there is a vulnerability and they hope for the best. You can see how easily these kind of situations arise. And there are people who have done a proof of concept and have let themselves into all kinds of restricted areas of the university. So, as an insider, what information do you know about the university that could help you mount an attack?
The processes, how to get accounts in here.
Yeah. You know things like how to go about becoming a new user, setting up an account, how the accounts actually work, how logins work, how the account system works, how you get access to different bits, the infrastructure.
Server naming conventions.
Server naming conventions, you know, it doesn't take long and a little bit of poking and maybe pinging a couple of things to work out how they actually name all of their servers. And the fact is, because they name a large amount of them, their actual proper names are numerical, all you have to do is just keep on increasing that number and you can do a scan of every single infrastructure server that the university has. You know, gone are the days where they all had names, like they used to call them things like Willow and Oak and Chestnut. And computer machines used to be called things like Mozart and things like that. They stopped doing that ages ago when we got far too many computers to ever be able to handle that. So now they're called things like BS-0000047569.soft.act.uk. At which point, enumerating through all of their servers becomes incredibly simple. And making sure that you're only looking at the servers and that you're not trying to access desktops, laptops, or Wi-Fi devices, because those are generally less exciting. But similarly, given any IP address on the university, you can then look up its hostname and work out this is a user, this is a permanent user, e.g. an academic or staff member, this is a student, or this is a server. And that will really help you if you're trying to compromise the infrastructure from outside the inside. Any other thoughts?
Open shares you can easily find.
Open shares that you can easily find, network discoveries on to make it easy for people to be able to connect things. And it shouts, hiya, this is our file server on this IP address. Yep, right here. Yeah, you need a username and password to log in, but this is where it is. This is what room it's in and what building it's in as well. You know, if you wanted to take a bit of a look on Christmas Day when absolutely nobody is around on campus and everything is all closed and there's minimal security. Any other thoughts?
Against social engineering, you know which people might be unhappy about their current situation or something?
Exactly. We've already said that social engineering would be one of the main ways to be able to attack the university. And we know the right people to go to. We know who's sitting at that particular desk. In fact, if we were to do a little bit of observation, we'd probably know which of the 3 people that sit at that desk, which one of them would be the most likely to open a piece of malware that we sent them. Because we've observed them, we've talked to them. 2 of them are actually quite good with technology, and one of them, every time you talk to her, she's just, he or she just goes, know nothing about computers, I hate the system, it's always breaking. Can you help me load this stuff up? And you probably know exactly who to target and in what way. So yes, that is how, and suddenly we can start seeing how these threats and risks can really become quite realistic. And actually, if somebody really wants to try to do an attack, it probably wouldn't be that hard for them to be successful, and that's a little bit scary. And this is why, again, at the very beginning, I said we're talking about fences, not walls, because the university has put up a lot of fences, but if you're really determined and knew your way around, actually, it probably wouldn't be that hard to attack the university. So that brings us to the end of our look at kind of risks, look at kind of threats, and how all of this fits together in a grand plan of cybersecurity. So does anyone have any questions from the lecture today at all? Okay, if you do have any follow-up questions, you know how to get a hold of me. And I will now, straight after this lecture, I'll be putting both the slides from yesterday and today up onto the website and onto the Facebook group as well. I'm sorry I didn't go up yesterday, I've just improved them slightly and made them a little bit more, restructured them slightly to make them a bit better. So all the notes will be going up. Thanks very much, it's been an amazing class.